Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO. Thank you very much for tuning in this morning. We go to the phones. Joining me this morning, Republican strategist Matt Mackowiak, the day before the election. Hey, Matt, what's going on this morning?
Hey, Chad. Good morning. How you doing?
Doing all right. Obviously, we spoke with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton earlier in the program. I've heard from Republicans who are raising eyebrows, at least, maybe a little concerned about some of the early voting numbers that we've seen across the state. And they're looking at the Beto O'Rourke-Ted Cruz race, and they're wondering if this thing is tightening up. What is your feeling on this race and some of the down-ballot races that I know you've been concerned about in Dallas and in Tarrant County?
Yeah, I think the two statewide to watch tomorrow night are going to be the U.S. Senate race between Cruz and O'Rourke, and then the Attorney General race between Paxton and Nelson. I still think the overwhelmingly most likely scenario is that the Republicans win both those seats. I think it's going to be a question of the margin. But you have seen kind of a flurry of last-minute spending in that AG race. Paxton's gotten some funding injections from supporting organizations, outside groups that have contributed to him to increase his media buy. So I think that's a sign the race is tightening. In terms of the Senate race, I tell you, I mean, I've had real difficulty knowing exactly what the truth is, to be honest with you, because I look at it and I just feel like the fundamentals in Texas are such that Cruz will win, and I've been saying for weeks, if not months, I think he wins in a 7 to 9 point range. We have seen some new voters get brought into this, presumably by O'Rourke, and there was a big splashy kind of pre-mortem, I guess you'd call it, in Politico magazine about Beto's campaign that posted late last night. I still think O'Rourke's not going to win, but I can't say it's 100%, which obviously depends on what the turnout is on Tuesday. I think Republicans need a big day on Tuesday. We've seen turnout up on both sides. Dallas County Democrats' turnout in the early vote is very high, and I think they've definitely made up some margin there. That Republicans have to catch up on Tuesday. So there are parts of the state that are more concerning than other parts. As long as Republicans turn out tomorrow, like they normally do on Election Day, I think Republicans are going to be fine at the top of the ticket. It's down ballot where there's going to be a lot to watch. You basically have probably two congressional races that are really close. The Pete Sessions race in Dallas and the John Culberson race in Houston, and then the Don Huffine State Senate race in Dallas as well. Those three, plus the two statewide, are the five races that I'm watching most closely on Election night.
When it comes to, are you hearing anything about Harris County? Because that's always the tricky one. They can go blue, they can go red. I mean, it's kind of that purple county. What are we seeing anything interesting out of Harris County right now?
It's not as strong for the Democrats as Dallas has been, and I think that. But let me say that Harris County has been trending in the wrong direction as an urban county. It was a county that had a very, very, very narrow margin in 2012, and just recently in 2016, I think Hillary won it by something like 160,000 votes. So that was a watershed, obviously moving in the wrong direction for the Republicans. There are many important races in Harris County, a number of state rep races. Obviously the Culberson congressional race, a couple other congressionals that people are watching a little bit. Even perhaps the state Senate race with the incumbent Joan Huffman. But fundamentally, the action's in Dallas. And I think there's a chance that if O'Rourke loses by a respectable margin, that Democrats could have some pickups, particularly in the Dallas area, and that could be meaningful in the next legislative session. Overall, I'm expecting one Senate seat at most, one state Senate seat at most, to go from Republican to Democrat, and probably something like 5 to 7 state House seats to go from Republican to Democrat. Other than that, I'm not expecting the Democrats to win any of the statewide races. And I think they're probably going to do well in some of these urban counties, like in Austin and Dallas and Houston and San Antonio. Outside of that, I think the suburbs and the rural areas remain Republican.
When you look at the national scene, how do you think this is going to go tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, if you're betting, you'd bet that the Democrats take the House back. Right. I think if they do, it won't be by much of a margin. It'll be by less than 5 seats, which won't give them much of a margin to work with. But I do still think there's an outside chance Republicans, hold the majority by a narrow margin as well. I'd probably put it at something like 70% Democrats take it back, 30% Republicans keep it. As I think I've told you before, if you look at the net of 23 seats that Democrats need, they can basically get half of it from California, New York, and New Jersey alone. Now, if they don't perform well in those states, then that makes it tougher. If Republicans pick up 2 seats in Minnesota, as I think they will, that makes it tougher. We're going to know pretty early on. I think at 6 o'clock Central, when the polls close at 7 o'clock Eastern, we should have some numbers from New York, from New Jersey, from Kentucky, where there's a really hotly contested race. Perhaps even from Pennsylvania. So we'll start to get some numbers, fairly early, and it may give us a little bit of a sign of what the night's going to look like. The last thing I'll just say, Chad, is there's a chance we won't know who has the majority. There's a chance that a number of these races are going to be so close that they're going to have to go into recounts, that the counting is going to take a lot of time, that you're going to provisional ballots. So I just think it's going to be a very late night, and I'd rather be the Democrats than the Republicans right now, but either way, for the House, I just think the margin is going to be very, very close either way. And I do expect Republicans to pick up a net of 3 or 4 Senate seats to go from 51 to 54 or 55.
And then no matter what, the 2020 race gets started, right?
Yeah, I know. It's relentless, isn't it? I think a lot of us would like to just not talk about politics or think about politics for a while. But you can bet that over the next 6 or 8 weeks, a lot of Democrats are going to be meeting with, their teams, meeting with their donors, meeting with activists in early states, and beginning to start, really aggressively travel. So yes, the president's campaign starts really Wednesday, particularly on the Democratic side, where those candidates have to get going, have to start raising money, have to start building support in the early states. And, there's going to be 20, 25 Democrats running, so there's going to be a real battle for oxygen on their side, and there's going to be a real, I think, demand for their candidates to get in as early as possible to start building. And so, we'll see what that means in terms of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, since they kind of overlap. We'll see what it means for some of these other ambitious Democrats in the Senate.
Do you think, with President Trump, he's not afraid to take a swipe at anybody. Do you think that we're going to be seeing 2 years of campaigning from the president?
I don't think it'll be anywhere near as relentless as it's been the last, month. He's doing whatever it is, 11 rallies in 6 days here, right before the midterms. I don't think it'll be like that. I think he'll go back to being really focused on his job. He obviously is not going to, presumably, he's not going to have, a meaningful primary. I do think there's a possibility you could have a third-party candidates run, but that would be more of an issue next fall rather than 2019. That'd be a fall 2020 issue. So I think he'll be actively raising money. He's already surpassed $100 million. I think faster than any incumbent president in history, which is a credit to his team and what they're doing. But no, look, I think that I think we know that when he gets attacked, he really feels a need to respond. I think Democrats are going to be attacking him morning, noon, and night up on Capitol Hill and out on the campaign trail for these presidential candidates. So I think he's probably going to be engaged day to day with a lot of these Democrats. But I don't think we're going to be seeing him doing rallies, every week. Certainly not in the early months of the new 2-year term in Congress.
All right, Matt Mackowiak, Republican strategist. Tell folks how they can sign up for your newsletter and who you interviewed in your latest podcast.
Yeah, we do a morning tip sheet for Texas called Must Read Texas. It takes all the news around the state. We put it in one clear email, send it to more than 3,000 subscribers. You can sign up for a free 1-week trial at mustreadtexas.com. The podcast is called Mac on Politics. It's with the Washington Times, where I think we're up to 106 episodes. Most recent episode is with Stephen Moore, who is a economic advisor to President Trump and has a new book out on Trump's economic agenda. It's very interesting. You can find that podcast on iTunes, on Google Play, Stitcher, and on the website, maconpoliticspodcast.com.
All right, Matt. Well, we'll visit with you next week, and we'll find out what happens tomorrow.
Sounds good. Take care.
Have a good one. That's Matt Mackowiak, Republican strategist.